Hi guys, this is Christine, my wife, and we are here to talk about today's sermon. Man, you dropped a message today that blew up in this house.
It was a good one. I think so.
I love it. It was fantastic. Listen, a few things you said that was catchy. I love the fact that we talked about we can't leave the world or the church to set our standards, especially for our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, we need to be very intentional with how we live, with how we raise our children, with how we set the parameters for our relationships, our marriages. We need to be very intentional, and those standards can't come from outside sources. It has to come from us, and it comes from us applying the word and applying the standards that the Lord has set out for us in those relationships.
The other thing I thought that was really good was the fact that you said standards are like security guards at your gate.
They are.
That's crazy. I love that. I really love that.
When you put standards in place for your life, they protect you, they keep you, they set a long-term sustainability for the course of your life. It's amazing what standards do.
So what do you think? You think they should check it out?
I think you should check this out. It's going to be a fantastic message. It's something for everyone, whether you're a parent or not, whether you're in a marriage or relationship. It just helps you identify how to set standards for your life and why they're so important and what happens when you don't have them.
Love it. All right, check it out.
But we're going to talk today a little bit about how to raise children. And I want to just premise it with this. Even if you're not a parent today, what we're going to be talking about today is stuff that you can take and apply to your own life. Because maybe one day you will be a parent. One day maybe you will be in a relationship if you're not in a relationship already. And these are things that can apply not only to your children, but they can apply to everything that you do. So don't worry if you don't have any little ones yet. This applies to you today. You know, I've been saved for a long time. I may not look like it, but I have been. And I've seen a lot of different things in the church over the years. And I've actually seen a lot of, is it better to do this? Pastor's insisting, guys.
Yeah, too much.
It's too much. Should I? You're just going to mute me? All right. Is that better? Much better. Okay. Can you hear me okay? All right. So I've actually been in the church for a long time. I've been in the faith for a little while. And over the years, I've actually seen different versions of Christianity and different versions of what people believe and what people teach that it is to be a believer. And I'm very happy with where I am now, I gotta tell you, because some of the stuff that we were taught over the years are not conducive to what actually Jesus done for us and what the Father has done for us and how we're actually supposed to live. And so there are a lot of people that I've learned over the years who really believe that what they're teaching and what they're doing is of God. Like, they believe it, Chan, with all their heart. They'll die for it. They'll stand. They will argue with you for it. But I've come to learn over the years, as our revelation has increased, as we've learned, as we've grown in the faith, that even though they believe it so hard, as time went on, the fruit didn't remain. As time went on, you actually didn't see the fulfillment of what they were teaching and what they were preaching and what they were espouting. And I got to tell you, friends, if what we're doing in the church and what we're doing in our faith and what we're doing as believers, what we do in our day-to-day, if it doesn't produce, if it doesn't make our lives better, if it doesn't lift God higher, if it doesn't show people who we are, then what we're doing, it's really in vain. If it's not producing a harvest, if it's not producing something lasting, then we're not doing something right. Oh, I need some help. Can you help me? Tech support.
Did you see that, Brandon? Desperate woman calls for man.
It's not my iPad. Thank you. No, but the highlighter was on. Sorry, guys, I'm highlighting my whole page here. Okay, thank you. My knight in shining armor. Woo! All right. There are too many people in the church who've started off good. They've started off well. They've started off with a lot of intention, a lot of fuel behind what they believe. They started off with a lot of fire. But in the end, they end up off the path. They end up in a bad situation. They end up not where they should be. And we've seen this so many times with children and with adults. And here's the thing. When people start to fall away, they start to fall away from the Lord. They start to fall away from God. And when they fall away from God, they walk away from Him. They ultimately walk away from the church. Now, I'm not talking about changing churches. I've changed churches in my lifetime. I've been to a few as I've been saved. That's not what we're talking about today. When we say walking away from the church, we're talking about people who have chosen to completely walk away and say, you know what, that's it. I don't need church. I'm going to go home and be a bedside Baptist. I'm going to go home and I'm going to serve the Lord on my own. I'm going to listen to my own worship music. I'm going to pray. I'm going to read the Bible. And I'm going to do it all by myself. There's a lot of that in this generation, all by myself. I don't need anybody. I don't need you. I'm going to do it all by myself. Look at me. I built me. Nobody else did. And there's a lot of that mentality. And so when people start to fade away, when they decide that they're going to leave the church, what they're ultimately doing is they're actually leaving God. Because before you can walk away from the church, you actually have walked away from the Lord. You've walked away from the Lord. When you leave God, you abandon all that is God. There are some people who think that they can still have God even though they've left the church. Have you ever heard that before? I don't need to go to church. I believe in God. I'm going to serve Him on my own at my house. Have you ever heard that? I'm just going to stay at home and watch some stuff online. I don't need to go to church to serve the Lord. I don't need to go to church to grow. I don't need to go to church for my faith. I have all the faith that I need. So I'm going to go home and I'm going to do me. You do you. And if that includes going to church, then have fun. And there's that mentality that I can go and leave and do it on my own and still live the life God has for me and still live for Him. But I got to tell you something. The Bible says this. I'm not making this up. God and the church are connected. It's like a head and a body. God and His church are connected. So you cannot have one without having the other. You cannot have God and not be part of His church. You get what I'm saying today? The body, the church, and God are connected like a body is connected to a head. So as you're sitting here with all of your beautiful heads attached to your bodies, it is the same thing. If your head is apart from your body, you will die. If you are walking, listen, we don't do the zombie thing here, okay? If your head is disconnected from your body, you will die. It's like a branch that's disconnected from a tree. That branch cannot live. That branch cannot flourish. It may last for a little bit. It may still bud for a little bit. But once you are disconnected, once that branch is disconnected, that's it. It will die. And it's the same thing when it comes to you being a part of the church and living for God. The two are connected. You cannot be a floating head disconnected from a body. You're dead. If you are not connected somewhere, you will die. And there's something very, very wrong about this thinking. But as I said, in this generation, there is this idea that I can do it on my own. It's not true. It's not true. When you are trained to know the truth from lies, you will know that this idea is a big fat lie. And if anybody has ever told you this and tried to feed you this nonsense, oh, we don't need the church. Oh, you don't need the church. You can serve the Lord without it. I got to tell you, they're lying to you. They're lying to you. They're telling you lies. Don't buy it. Don't buy the nonsense. But here's the thing. We were talking about training up a child last week, and we're continuing with that idea. But I just want to mention this today. When you are not trained, you have a difficult time realizing what is real. When you are not trained, you'll buy into all sorts of nonsense. People put their faith in all kinds of crazy things. You know those special oils that you can buy for $19.99. And if you just apply it every day, you will see this in your life. Or those special shawls that you have to wear every time you go to pray. So when you put the shawl on, somehow God hears you better. And when you're not trained, you buy into all this nonsense and unbiblical beliefs and all these kinds of gimmicks because you don't know how to recognize what is real from what is not. And that's why it's so important not only to train our children, but ourselves. Believers who are not trained cannot recognize what is from God and what is from the devil. Let me ask you this, and you don't have to answer, it's a rhetorical question. How do you know the difference between when God is speaking, when the devil is speaking, or when your emotions are speaking? Because we can be led by all three things. When God is speaking, when the devil is speaking, or when your emotions are speaking. Last week, Pastor talked a little bit about Samuel, and you mentioned Samuel. Can't remember now. So much has happened this week. But Samuel, as a little boy, was trained to recognize the voice of God. You guys remember the story about Samuel? It's in 1 Samuel chapter 3. He couldn't recognize the voice of God until what happened? Eli instructed him. Because Samuel, in that story, he kept hearing this voice, and he kept running over to Eli, and he's like, "Did you call me? Did you wake me up? Like, what?" And he's like, no, go to bed. And then finally Eli realized that it was the Lord, and he trained Samuel how to hear the voice of God and how to recognize who was calling him. I got to tell you, so we've been pastoring now for, KICC's 12 years old. We're 12. No, we're going to be 13 this year. Yeah, we're going to be 13. But I got to tell you, there have been a lot of times over the years where people have said to us that they've heard from God. And they really believe they heard from the Lord. They really believe what they were about to do, God said it, God is leading it, God is in it, He's all over it. They really believed. But all along, it was really just their feelings. They were all caught up in their emotions, and they took what they were feeling and they tried to make it look pretty and spiritual by saying that God said, God is leading me. A lot of times people take their own personal desires. I really want this to happen, or I really feel this is what I'm supposed to do. So I'm going to add a God said and make it a God said. When in fact, God is not actually leading you that way. It's your own emotions and your own personal desires and your own selfish need to have something happen. And sometimes it is selfish. You know how many times people have said, God told me to marry that man. True story. It's a true story. This actually happened at KICC. There was a young lady who really believed that God had told her to marry this man. And she was all sold out. She's like, I'm going to marry this man. He's going to be my husband. We're going to build a life together. We're going to go and have a happily ever after. And there was one problem. The man was already married. He was legitimately married to someone else, not her. But she said with all her heart and all her conviction, God told me this man is for me. That's when you're not trained. Because a trained person would realize a married man is a no-go. If that man belongs to somebody else, he does not belong to you. God will never say to you, go and take that man from his wife and make him your husband. I'm sorry. If you've ever believed that, let me correct the lie for you now. It's wrong. It's wrong. God would never tell you that. Another true story. Again, we actually know this person. A man was he was a teacher, a professor. For many years, he'd been married a long time. And he decided after, I don't know, it must have been about 30 years of marriage, that God told him to leave his wife and marry his secretary. This is a true story. It is a true story. Honestly, this actually happened, and we found out about it, and we thought this man knew God. We thought this man was of the Lord. And then we find out that he, for his own desires, decided to smack a God said on what he wanted to do and make it official. Listen, you cannot make something up and add a God said to it and make it true. You can't do it. It doesn't work like that. It's not going to happen. It will never, ever be a God said. You've got to train yourself to hear the voice of the Lord and submit to his leading. And the only way you're going to do that is when you're in a church. That's all I got to say. And if you don't have a church, KICC is a good one. We train you to do those things. But training is essential to recognize God's ways. Can you imagine if you send an untrained person into surgery? I believe that I'm a surgeon and I can conduct this brain surgery. Can you imagine? Can you imagine sending an untrained person into the cockpit of a plane? Kev, what are we going to do? Listen, I am very fond of my life. I would never, ever get into a plane with someone who believes they are a pilot. I think I can do this. God said I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I'm going to be a pilot today. No, thank you. I am not getting on that plane. But training is essential to getting things right. Somebody say amen. Training is essential to long-term sustainability. We are called to live lives for the long haul. None of this 5-minute blessing, 5-minute victory, 5-minute I'm better now. It's supposed to be our lifetime. It's supposed to be a lifetime of blessing. It's supposed to be a lifetime of victory. It's supposed to be a lifetime of I am good. No matter what's happening around me, I am in the Lord. He is in me and I'm good. It's supposed to be a lifetime. Training will help you develop long-term sustainability. And when it comes to our little ones, it's so important to train them. To train them for long-term sustainability. It's so important to train them to have a good life. You can actually train your children to have that. It doesn't just fall in their lap. There's a big part that we have to play. Proverbs 22:6, it's our scripture for today. It says, train up a child in the way he should go, and even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Train them up. From the beginning, from the moment you hold them in your hands, you begin to train them. This is the way that we walk. This is the way that we talk. This is the way that we live because we belong to the Lord. I got to tell you this, and I love this, and you might not, but it's okay. If we are going to train up our children in the way that they should go, then adults and parents and all those in this room, I got to tell you this, you must be willing to go that way yourself. If you are not going that way, do not expect your children to do it. You need to go that way yourself. You ever hear that saying, do what I say, not what I do? Doesn't work with kids. We've learned that firsthand. But dad's doing it. It's always but dad's doing it. It's never but mom's doing it, okay? I just got to tell you that. Abby and Neil are always, but dad did it. Okay. It's never do what I say, not what I do. It does not work with them. Every single journey for every single child begins with their parents. It begins by following their parents. And the choices that we make and how we live could have a lifetime impact on them. Because what we do as parents when we have our little ones is we are actually building the foundation of what their life is going to be. Those are tall shoes to fill, because you have a life that's been entrusted to you, and every child that you have, God has entrusted to you to raise, to care for, to love, and most importantly, to train. And so the choices that we make and how we live will have an impact on them. And there's no maybes, there's no buts, there's no maybe it won't turn out. No, the choices you make, parents, are going to impact your children. There's no ifs, ands, or buts in that statement. It is going to impact your child. Whatever it is that you decide to do, however it is that you decide to live, you are impacting your child every day, every moment. Every time they're around you, you are impacting them. We've all been impacted by the choices of our parents. Every single person in this room. For better or for worse, however our parents raised us, however they treated us, however they lived before us, we have been impacted by them. And sometimes those impacts last for a long time. Sometimes those impacts carry right into our adulthood. Sometimes those impacts result in different types of struggles and strains and low self-esteem and a lack of confidence and feelings of abandonment because mom didn't love me the way she was supposed to. Dad didn't protect me the way he was supposed to. And all of us in this room have been impacted by the choices that our parents have made. And some parents have made amazing choices. And they've raised really strong, resilient children that serve the Lord. But some of our parents, they didn't get it right. There's a lot of times where parents don't make good choices. And I'm not saying we have to be perfect. That is not at all what I'm saying. But we do need to be mindful that everything that we do affects the ones that we're given. The choices we make reveal a lot about who we are and the values that we hold. So as you live your life every day, the choices you make reveal who you are and the values that you hold. Now, if you didn't know, Pastor Asif, this gentleman right here, he made a lot of bad choices. He made a lot of really bad choices in life. If you know his testimony, you know that he didn't walk the right way for a very long time. But his best choice was me, I just got to tell you. But choices have bad results and they have good results. They can bring you a blessing or they can bring you a consequence. They can set you up for a good life or they can set you up for a hard one. They can set you up for emotional stability or they can set you up for emotional instability. Choices have good results and bad results. Now let me tell you this. No choice is ever random. You never make a random choice. You never make let's see how it goes. All of our choices come from the standards we already hold. All of the choices and the decisions we make come from the values that we've already instilled in our own lives. All of the choices that you're going to make and that you have made come from what you already believe. There's no choice that's ever random. Every single choice we make has a belief behind it. Every single one. Every single choice we make has a belief behind it. And that belief is a standard that we hold to. You know, and you may not have known this about me, but I'll share. The neighborhood I grew up in, it wasn't an easy one. It was filled with a lot of crime, a lot of drugs, a lot of government housing, A lot of people doing things that they weren't supposed to be doing. I remember one time I was sitting beside a friend in high school, and we were just chatting, and he said something, and I went to hit his leg. He's like, oh, shut up, and it was something really hard in his pocket, and I'm like, what is that? And he looks at me, and he tucks it away, and he's like, I need this. It's for protection. But he had a gun in school. And so there are all these kids that were doing all kinds of things. I grew up in that generation where teenagers were starting to get pregnant. It was that time. I'm not now, okay, now you know how old I am. But it was that time where young girls were starting to get pregnant out of wedlock, and they were having kids in grade 11 and grade 12. And before they even graduated high school, they were becoming mamas. I knew people who were doing it. I went to school with them, played dominoes with them. I ate lunch with them. We hung out together. But I got to tell you this. I never, ever became involved in what they were doing because I had set a personal standard for myself as to the kind of life I wanted to live. And I always knew I never wanted to be in this. I say this to Pastor all the time. I say this to Asif. I never, ever wanted to be a have-not when I was a kid. So I knew I had to set my life up in a way that would create the opportunities for me to get the things that I wanted. And so I set standards in my life because I knew I wanted a different life. And so in every person's life, there are standards that you have set for yourself. Right now, as you're sitting in this room, there are a set of standards that you have set for yourself based on what you believe, based on how you've been treated, based on what you've been taught. You have set a set of standards for yourself. Now, don't think you have no standards, because that's a lie. Everybody has standards. They're either high or they're low. But everybody has standards. Everybody has standards about how they're going to let other people treat them. Everybody has standards about what kind of relationships they're going to get in. Everybody has standards about how they're going to treat others. Everybody has standards about how they're going to treat their spouse, about their loved ones, their children. Everybody here has standards. You have set standards for yourself. But they're high or they're low. Sometimes in a home, you can have parents that have different standards. So you can have one parent who will cuss and brawl off, and the other parent who won't. Or you may have a parent that drinks excessively and another parent that doesn't. Or you may have a parent that smokes a lot and another parent doesn't. You can have parents that don't agree in all different kinds of things. One smokes weed, the other one doesn't. But I got to tell you this, when you have this kind of environment in your home where one of you is doing one thing and the other one is doing another, you're going to create a double standard for your children. If you're someone who likes to lie and cheat and be critical of others and condemn and gossip, then you're creating an environment where your child is also going to do that. And what's happening is when one person is doing something and the other one is doing something else, you're creating a double standard for your children. So we can't be surprised when little Joey starts doing things that you don't really want him to do because you know what? He's been exposed to it, and in his home, it's been identified as being okay. So you can't be surprised when little Joey starts running the streets or starts saying things he shouldn't say or starts doing drugs or starts whatever he's doing because somewhere along the line, he's been told by one of his parents, by people who are in authority over his life, that this is okay. Have you ever met someone with a double standard? Say one thing and do another. This is okay, but that's not, but they're both on the same plane. All children need standards, not just prayers. A lot of times in the church, I don't think it's anybody here, but it happens in the church. People just think, if I just pray for my children, they're going to be okay. If I just pray and pray and pray, every night I'll go and pray over them. Every morning I pray over them before they leave for school. They're going to be okay. I got to tell you, friends, it is not just prayer that will keep your children. They need standards. In your home, you must have a set of standards that you live by. In your relationships, you must have a set of standards that you live by. For yourself, you must have a set of standards that you live by. You have to set it. There cannot be one set of standards for the kids and another set for the adults. You ever hear that? I'm an adult. I can do this. They're watching you. They're watching you. And down the line, they're going to be like, Dad did this. Now I'm of age. I can do it also. It's not about kids and adults having different standards. It's one standard for the whole family. And you as parents, you as leaders, you will set that standard, whatever it is, whatever kind of life you want your child to live, whatever kind of life it is that you want to live, you need to set the standard of how that's going to go. You can't expect them to live for Christ if you're not doing it. You can't expect them to live a life that you were unwilling to model before them. You can't expect it. You cannot expect them to do what you are not doing. Doesn't work that way. You cannot expect them to place importance on the things of God if you're not doing it. There has to be one standard. There's one standard in our home. There has to be one standard. Some people believe that if I just pray, little Joey will be okay. If I just bring them to Sunday school, little Joey's going to be okay. It's not up to your Sunday school teachers to raise your children. We love them. Our Sunday school is dynamic. Our kids love it. They can't wait to get there every Sunday. But I got to tell you, it's not our place to raise them. We can teach them. We can help instruct them, but we are not the ones that are responsible for training them. And so, it's not just about prayer, and it's not just about Sunday school. It is about the standards that you set for yourself, your home, and for your family. Your standards will make your life run smoothly. It's a good place to say amen. Listen, I got to tell you, at KICC, we pray a lot. 9:30 every morning, we have prayer in this back room. If you haven't come, you should. It's really fantastic. Come and join us for prayer before the service. We have prayer at mid-altar. We have prayer after the altar. We have prayer all kinds of times going on. We have an intercession team. They're always praying. They have requests coming at them every single day. They're always praying. Listen, there is a lot of prayer in this church. But you know what? People still get on and behave bad. They still don't do the right things. If it was only about prayer, then everybody should be doing the right things. It's not just about prayer. It's about what you are willing to live up to. It's about how you have decided to govern your life. It's about the standards that you have set for yourself. If there are no standards, everybody will do what they please, behave how they want, say what they feel, do whatever they want, go wherever they want to go. They're just going to do anything and everything because there's no standard set for how we live. There are too many people in this generation who behave based on how they feel. Oh, I feel this and I'm not going to church today because so-and-so offended me. Oh, I feel upset because they didn't sing my favorite worship song, so I'm not going back to that church. Oh, I'm not going to talk to that person. I'm so turned off because I didn't like the way that she passed me by. We get all caught up in our feelings and so easily offended, and then we make decisions based on these feelings and these offenses. We can't make emotional decisions. We cannot become emotional train wrecks, always moving. I feel like this today, now I feel like this today. Now I feel like this today, now I feel... You can't govern your life based on your emotions. You're going to be a yo-yo. You're going to be a train wreck, right? Honestly, you're going to be a train wreck. You are going to be up and down no matter what. One day it's good and you're great. The next day it's not and you're awful. The next day it's okay and you're mediocre. You're going to be all over the place. Listen, even the devil has standards. The Bible tells us that he has set his standard to steal, to kill, and destroy. He has already set his mission statement for his life. What's yours, church? What's yours? My point is this. We cannot let society, or celebrities or our school system. There's a lot of craziness going on in our school system. If your kids go to public school, parents, you need to educate yourself on what's happening in our public schools. It's crazy what they're trying to teach our children and what they're trying to get them to believe. This generation right now that's in school is one of the most confused generations ever. You cannot allow the school system to set the standards for you. We must be the standard for our children. We must be the ones that set the foundation. We must be the ones that set the line. This is what we will do. This is what we don't do. We have to set it. We cannot leave it to others to decide for our children what they will believe, how they will live, how they see themselves, and how they identify. Last I checked, the Bible said it was Adam and it was Eve. There was two. Hasn't changed. There was no revision on the Bible. God didn't say, hold up, let me make a tweak. There were no tweaks. The Genesis account still stands. There's a whole lot of young people living in confusion and despair because standards were not set for them about who they were created to be and who they are called to be in this world. Every single child on this planet has been called. There is a destiny and a purpose for them. They were not a mistake. God didn't say, oops, I didn't see that one coming. He knew every single one that was coming, and he set a plan for every single child that walks the face of this earth. But the sad thing is that they don't know it. They've never heard it. No one's told them. There's a lot of young people who have no idea who they were created to be. From the moment we got Avi and Elin, we taught them. We told them. We made sure they knew who you were created to be. It's something, sadly, you have to reinforce regularly because the messaging around us is crazy. It's on the billboards. It's in all the shows you watch. It's in commercials. It's in stories. It's in everything. You're on social media, you get all these feeds of different ideas and different methodologies and all these things that they want you to adopt to. And it's something that you have to constantly reinforce because there's so much junk out there trying to tell them to believe something else. We made sure our boys knew that God made them men. And we reinforce that. You are a man. You're a young man. You're growing into a big man. What kind of man? We enforce they are men. Listen, I think we can all agree that it's insanity. It's crazy. It's the stupidest idea ever to leave a child with a loaded handgun. So then why do we leave children without standards? Is that not crazy itself? We're leaving them to have anything written upon their hearts and their minds. We're leaving them to have anything poured into them to influence them on how they should live and what they should do. Anything can happen. When you have no standards, your home, your mind, your children, they become open to the attacks of the enemy. This is how the devil gets in and he messes up our life. Standards are like security guards. They stand at the gate of your minds and they stand at the gate of your mouths to stop evil from going in or coming out. Your standards will actually prevent your family from straying. Your standards can actually prevent the attack of the enemy. Your standards can actually help your children set their lives up to make good choices and live holy before the Lord. Your standards will do that. We've got to guard the gate, friends. Say that with me, guard the gate. We've got to guard the gate. We've got to guard the gates of our minds, of our mouths, of our children's emotions. We have to guard everything. We have to be vigilant in this hour, in this day. We need to be vigilant with how we raise the ones God has given us. It's not just prayers. It's not just attending church on Sunday. We're glad you're here. You need to be here. But this alone is not going to protect your family. You need to have standards. You need to train up your children in the way that they should go. so that when they are old, they will not depart. You know what they will not depart means? They will continue to hold those standards. And when they continue to hold those standards, they will continue to live a life that's blessed. If you hold the standard of the Lord, there is no way you're going to get swept away by the works of the enemy, because you are holding on to a standard that does not fail. You are holding on to a standard that does not waver. You are holding on to a standard that has been proven true for generations and generations and generations. From the time that Adam and Eve were on this earth to our time here, God's word has stood, and it has never, ever faltered. Never. When you set your child up, when you train them in the way that they should go, you are setting them up to keep their guards up and live the life that they were created to have. It's not just prayers, friend. It's not just Sunday school. It's our standards. We can pray all we like. If we drop our standards, our prayers are kind of null and void, because we're not living it. When you let your guard down, you let your children down. Then you let your family down. Nobody here who's a parent, nobody here who wants to be a parent, wants to have our children go and live a wayward, hard, struggling life. None of us want to do it. None of us want to see that for our children. We always want our children to have more than we had. We always want them to learn more, to live better, to live more blessed than we have. No parent in here wants their children to go down that path. But listen, if we don't set standards, we're leaving them without protection. When you have standards, you can't be manipulated by your emotions or the emotional meltdowns of others. There's a lot of people having emotional meltdowns these days. But listen, when you've set your standard, you won't be moved by them. So you can't be swayed to believe something else because someone's crying. You can't be swayed to shift your standard because someone's screaming. You can't be swayed to shift your standard because someone's having a meltdown. When you set your standards, they will hold no matter what's going on around you. And when you set the standards for your children, they will hold no matter what's going on around them. When you have set standards, you remain on the path when the pressure comes in. When you set standards for your children, they will remain on the path when the pressure comes in. When they go to school and you set those standards for them, no matter what's being taught around them, they will maintain the path. When they're facing a bully, some of our young ones, they talk about having bullies at school all the time. When you set the standard for them, they will realize who they are and how they're supposed to be treated and who they are on this earth. You have to set the standards. We cannot be manipulated by schools, by government, by society, by other people in the church who maybe don't have standards set for themselves. We've got to set the standards, and we've got to train up our children in the way that they should go. Our standards will keep us on the straight and narrow. When you see children going wayward, when you see marriages falling apart, when you see divorces happening, it's because the standard hasn't been fulfilled. It hasn't been kept. It hasn't been set. When you see things falling apart, it's because the standards are not there that should be there. When you see marriages falling apart and spouses cheating on each other and people walking out and leaving children behind, it's because a standard has not been set in place for how we're going to live. How are we going to govern ourselves? What are we going to do as we're here on this earth? What are we going to do with the children God has given us? There's no standard set. You see a lot of people with personal failures, it's because of a lack of standards. It's not a lack of prayer. You know how many people find themselves in the mess and they're like, oh, God, help me. Oh, God, I need help. They come to the altar and they pray. They're in some kind of mess with some kind of man or some kind of financial problem or some kind of something. And they come quickly for prayer. It's not because they lack prayer. It's because they lack standards. It's not because they don't have an education. Listen, you may know what I do, you may not. But I got to tell you, I've met a lot of educated people who've even gone on to university, graduated, lived really good lives, and still got themselves in a mess, still committed crime, still went to jail, still did things they weren't supposed to do. You know why? Because it doesn't matter what the level of your education is, their standards were not set. And so to them, no matter how far they've attained, they had no personal standard for their life, so they let themselves get involved in things they shouldn't, and now they're paying a penalty. That is stupid. It's a lack of standards. Contrary to what you may believe, Caribbean parents believe this a lot, I think. I don't know, maybe some Africans might say the same thing. But beating your children when they do wrong does not set the standards for them. How you live sets the standards. What you give them for an example sets the standards. You have to live the life you want them to emanate. You have to live it. If you don't, you're not going to get it from them. If you want your children to be loving and kind and forgiving and full of grace and full of mercy, and you want them to treat people well, and you want them to have manners, then guess what, friends? You have to live that way too. You can't get upset when little Johnny's rude when they just saw you be rude to the cashier at Walmart. You can't be upset when little Johnny drops a little bomb that he shouldn't be saying when he heard you say it to the driver on the road in front of you. I'm sorry, but you have to live it. If you don't live it, they're not going to. It is not going to happen. Do not be deceived. If you believe that, let me burst that bubble for you today. If you do not live it in front of them, they will not live it in front of you or behind you. You want your children to have those standards when they go away to school, when they go away to work, when they go and they hang out with their friends. You want to make sure that those standards are set early so that they will continue to follow them no matter how old they get, no matter what situation they're in, no matter who they are around. Those foundations are locked in and they are not budging. We have to set it and we have to live it. People who are untrained in the ways of God open their lives up for the force of the enemy. I don't think anybody here wants that for their children. Having standards will help you recognize what's right from wrong. And she says, we're about to close this off. I want to look at Romans 7:7, and it says this: it was the law that showed me sin. I would have never known that coveting was wrong if the law did not say, you must not covet. See, the standard of the law shows us right from wrong. The standards that you set for yourself will show your children right from wrong. How you live before them will show them what's right and what's wrong. You don't have to preach or yell or punishment. You just have to live it. You just have to live it, friends. You just have to live it before them. You have to live right. You have to speak right. You have to honor and love before them. You have to do it in front of them. If you don't do it in front of them, it's not going to happen. But when you live it, everything else will fall in line. The Bible tells us again, Proverbs 22:6, train them up in the way they should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it. We must set the standards in our lives, and we must train our children in the way they should go. And we have to go there before them and show them how it's done. Otherwise, we're not going to see them do it. Listen, maybe you're here today and you haven't put standards in place for your relationships, for your marriages, for your children. I want to tell you, it's not too late. You can start today and change things. Maybe you're here today and you've said one thing and you've done another. Maybe you have a bunch of double standards that you've been exhibiting before your children. Well, we come to church on Sunday, but on Saturday night we do something else. I want to tell you today, it's not too late to change it. You can set a better standard for your family today. Maybe you're here and you're still living with the repercussions of the choices and the decisions that your parents made in front of you. I mentioned it a few minutes ago that sometimes the things that our parents do carry on with us through the years. And sometimes we continue to deal with the lack of confidence and the low self-esteem because of the things that they said to us. Or we continue to have trouble trusting people because we could never trust our parents because they hurt us so many times. Or maybe we have difficulty learning how to be around people because we never had good examples of what it was to interact with people. Or maybe you continue to feel abandoned or alone, or that you have to do things on your own because you never felt the love and the security that you should have as you were growing up. I want to tell you today that it is not too late. You can be free from those things, and you can set a better standard in place for your life. It's not just prayer, friends. It's not just talking. It's about living for God and living His standard. Would you stand with me all over today?